The first thing people noticed when Sienna walked into the office wasn't her beauty, though she had plenty of that. No, it was the way she carried herself, confident, calm, like someone who had already conquered every room she'd ever entered. She didn't shrink, didn't hesitate, didn't wait for permission. And in a company like Vireo and Locke, where cutthroat ambition passed for charm and smiling through sabotage was an art form, that kind of presence stood out. It was her first day on the 27th floor. The office was glass and steel, modern and merciless. Everyone looked sleek, sharp, hungry. Sienna wasn't intimidated. She wore a fitted navy dress that hugged her curves just enough to be noticed, and heels that clicked across the marble like punctuation. Her locks were twisted up in a bun, and her eyes, hazel with flecks of gold, scanned the room like she already knew who mattered. And he noticed her. Julian Carr, partner, co-founder, untouchable. He was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Mid-40s, with silver streaks in his dark hair and a jawline that could cut glass. He had that polished look money gave a man, custom suits, cufflinks with tiny initials, and shoes that cost more than most people's rent. Julian's eyes tracked Sienna like a hawk watching prey, or a man watching trouble he knew he'd invite in anyway. "She's the new strategic lead for LuxTech," his assistant whispered as he stared. "Came from LA big agency background. They say she turned down a VP offer at Halberstam just to come here." Julian didn't respond. He just watched as Sienna made her way toward the conference room, introduced herself to a few wide-eyed juniors, and took a seat like she'd already earned it. And in a way, she had. Sienna wasn't here to make friends. She was here to take over. 2 floors down, Kayla watched Sienna's arrival from her office, a sleek glass box overlooking Millennium Park. Kayla was the kind of woman who planned her life the way CEOs planned takeovers. Blonde, precise, and always perfectly put together. As the director of corporate affairs, she didn't miss much, especially not the way her husband had just looked at the new girl. Julian. Of course he noticed her. Men like him always noticed women like Sienna. But Kayla wasn't threatened. Not really. She knew the rules of power. She and Julian were a team, on paper, in public, and in bank accounts. She gave him the polish he needed. He gave her the status she craved. Love wasn't part of the deal anymore, if it ever was. Still, Kayla watched with narrowed eyes as Sienna smiled that slow, practiced smile and shook Julian's hand. It was subtle, the way their fingers lingered, the way his eyes didn't quite leave hers. Subtle, but dangerous. The first meeting didn't start until 10 o'clock, but by then, word had already spread about the new hire. "She's from L.A.? No wonder she looks like she belongs on a screen, not in strategy. I heard she used to date that crypto guy. What's his name? Malik something. He's like billionaire adjacent now." Yeah, but did you see the way Julian looked at her? The office buzzed with whispers and eyes that lingered a little too long. But Sienna didn't flinch. She opened her MacBook, slid a hand over her sleek notebook, and waited for the meeting to start. Julian entered last, always did, and when he took the seat at the head of the table, his eyes met hers again. Not a flicker, not a smile, just acknowledgement, like they both knew something no one else in the room did. The pitch meeting was a success. Of course it was. Sienna had that mix of polish and edge, intellect and charisma that made people believe her even when she was bullshitting. Clients loved her, executives respected her, and junior staff envied her. Julian didn't say much during the presentation, but afterward, as everyone filed out, he lingered. "You have a sharp mind," he said casually, hands in his pockets, voice smooth as silk. "Your background's impressive." Sienna met his gaze. "That's why you hired me." Julian tilted his head slightly, a smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Among other reasons. Sienna arched an eyebrow, lips parting just enough to be suggestive. Let me guess. You needed someone who doesn't mind shaking things up? He chuckled, deep and low. Something like that? Their eyes locked, and in that moment something passed between them, not a spark. A fire, slow-burning, dangerous, inevitable, and they both knew it. Kayla stood in the penthouse kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, dressed in a silk robe that cost more than Sienna's monthly rent. Julian came in late, like always, loosening his tie as he walked. How was the new hire? She asked without turning around. Julian paused, just long enough for her to notice. Smart, confident. She'll be good for the LuxTech campaign. Kayla turned then, wineglass in hand. Beautiful too, I imagine. Julian smiled faintly. Does that matter? Kayla sipped her wine. Only if it matters to you. He didn't answer, just walked past her, into the living room and turned on the news. But Kayla saw the flicker in his eyes. And she knew. Sienna was already plotting. She knew the look Julian gave her. She knew the kind of man he was, powerful, controlled, drawn to women who didn't need him, but made him feel like they might want him anyway. She also knew about Kayla, the picture-perfect wife with the cold stare and killer instincts. Sienna didn't want Julian. Not really. She wanted what he had. Power, influence, control. And if taking him was part of the game, well, she'd always liked playing with fire. The following Monday, the office felt different. People were still talking about the pitch, how Sienna had taken control, how the client seemed mesmerized, how even Julian Carr had nodded his approval without saying a word. That never happened. But it wasn't the meeting they whispered about. It was the elevator ride, Sienna and Julian, alone. 4 floors of silence thick with energy. No cameras, no assistants, just glass walls and reflection. Sienna had leaned slightly against the mirrored panel, not quite looking at him. Julian had kept his hands in his pockets, watching the numbers tick up. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Tuesday morning, a calendar invite appeared in Sienna's inbox. Private strategy session. Julian Carr's office, 7:30 p.m. No details, no CC, just a time, a place, and a sender. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. When she arrived that evening, the 27th floor was quiet. Most of the lights were dimmed. The open floor plan felt abandoned, like the aftermath of a storm. Julian's office door was slightly open, the soft glow of a desk lamp spilling into the hallway. She pushed it open without knocking. He looked up from a folder, eyes flicking to her. You came. Sienna closed the door behind her. Was there a question? He smiled. There was a bottle of scotch on the table, 2 glasses, a folder with LuxTech's logo, and silence. Julian gestured to the seat across from him. Let's talk strategy. They did for exactly 15 minutes. Then the conversation drifted, first to previous clients, then to bad hires, then to ambition. Why'd you really leave L.A.? Julian asked, eyes narrowing slightly. Sienna took a sip of her drink, slow and measured. I outgrew it. Outgrew the agency? The city, the people, the lies. He raised an eyebrow. You think it's different here? She leaned in, voice like velvet. Number, I think I'm different now. There was a pause, then he said, That's dangerous. Sienna tilted her head. For who? Julian didn't answer. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, across town, Kayla was having dinner with her best friend and stylist, Zoe, at a rooftop restaurant in River North. The kind of place with cocktails named after French queens and waiters who remembered your drink after one visit. So this Sienna woman, Zoe said, cutting into her sea bass, she's... What exactly? A strategist or a threat? Kayla smiled tightly. Sometimes they're the same thing. Zoe gave her a look. You don't usually let things like this rattle you. I'm not rattled, Kayla said too quickly. I'm watching. Zoe sipped her wine. You think Julian's cheating? Kayla paused. Then, not yet. There was a moment of silence between them. Then Zoe said, But if he does? Kayla's smile was ice. Then I won't need a divorce lawyer. I'll need a PR team. Back at the office, the clock read 8:42 p.m. The city lights shimmered below, and Julian poured another drink. Sienna stood by the window, looking out at the skyline. You ever think about walking away from all this? Julian stood beside her, just close enough for his presence to warm the air. Every day, he said, but I never do. Why not? Because power is addictive. She turned, looked him in the eyes. And what about desire? His voice dropped. That's worse. There was silence. And then a knock. Both of them froze. The door creaked open. It was Mason, the junior associate who'd been eyeing Sienna like a wolf since day one. Young, handsome, too eager. Sorry, he stammered. I didn't know anyone was still here. I left my, charger. Sienna smiled. No worries, we were just wrapping up. Julian said nothing, his eyes fixed on the boy. Mason ducked in, grabbed his charger, muttered a quick good night, and disappeared. When the door shut again, Sienna laughed softly. That was close, she said. Julian looked at her, and for the first time he looked uncertain. This is a bad idea, he said. Sienna smiled. That's what makes it fun. Wednesday, 9:13 a.m. Julian stood in front of the boardroom, presenting quarterly projections to the executive team. His voice was steady, his posture perfect, but his mind was fractured, half in the room, half still stuck in that quiet moment by the window with Sienna. She was seated to his left, legs crossed, tablet in hand, not even glancing at him. The picture of professionalism. But he knew. He felt it. And so did Kayla, seated at the far end of the table, watching both of them like a hawk. When the meeting ended, she cornered him by the coffee bar. She's talented, she said casually. Julian blinked. Excuse me? Sienna, Kayla said, pouring almond milk into her espresso. She has presence. Julian said nothing. She reminds me of myself, Kayla added, before walking off. Julian stood there, heart racing, because Kayla never complimented anyone unless she was about to destroy them. That night, Sienna got a text from a blocked number. You're playing a dangerous game. No name, no emojis, no punctuation. Just a warning. Sienna stared at it for a moment, then typed back, I always win. By Friday, the air inside Vireo and Locke was electric. Not with excitement, with suspicion. Sienna had carved a place for herself so quickly it felt almost unnatural. 2 weeks in, and she was already included on client dinners, invited to executive briefings, whispered about in corners. But what no one could quite confirm was why. Why Julian was suddenly so invested. Why Sienna always seemed to know just a little more than she should. And why Kayla had started showing up in the office unannounced. She never used to. But now she did, twice in 3 days, always unbothered, always poised, and always with a reason just vague enough to be questioned. And when she passed Sienna in the hallway, the smiles were lethal. That Friday morning, Julian stood at the floor-to-ceiling window in his office, phone pressed to his ear. She's smart, he was saying, and dangerous. On the other end, his brother and company co-founder, Marcus Carr, let out a dry laugh. Like that's ever stopped you before? Julian sighed. Kayla's watching me. Then maybe you shouldn't be watching her. There was a pause. Then Marcus added, Look, man, I don't care who you screw, but don't blow up the company doing it. The call ended, and Julian was left staring at his reflection in the glass. He didn't recognize the man looking back. Downstairs in the design department, Mason was watching Sienna, too. She didn't know it yet. Or maybe she did. But Mason had been keeping tabs, watching the way she floated through the office like smoke, the way Julian looked at her, the way she sometimes smiled at Mason like he wasn't invisible. He was ambitious. Too ambitious for his pay grade, and if Sienna was a shortcut to something bigger, he'd take it. That afternoon, he waited until everyone else had left the break room. Then he cornered her. You and Julian, he said. What's really going on? Sienna looked up from her coffee. That's a bold question. Bold world, Mason said with a shrug. I'm not judging. I notice things. She studied him for a moment, eyes sharp. Then you should know better than to ask questions without answers. Mason smirked. You ever need help covering tracks? I'm good at playing dumb. Sienna leaned in, just slightly. And what would you want in return? He didn't flinch. A seat at the table. A real one. She held his gaze, then smiled. We'll see. That night, Sienna didn't go home. She went to a private rooftop bar in River West, where Julian was already waiting. No words, just tension. He watched her approach, eyes tracing the curve of her silhouette under the soft gold light. You shouldn't have come, he said. She sat anyway. You asked me to. Julian exhaled slowly, like the weight of it was catching up to him. This is reckless, Sienna tilted her head. You're not the type to do anything that doesn't serve you. He looked at her, really looked, like maybe he was trying to figure out where her cracks were. What do you want, Sienna? She leaned in, voice like silk. Power. Julian blinked. Then you're in the wrong business, she smiled. Not if I know where to find it. And then she touched his hand. Just a graze. But enough. Enough to make him lean in. Enough to make him forget. Across town, Kayla was in her home office, not drinking, not crying, planning. She'd pulled Sienna's file 3 days ago, called a contact at the agency in L.A., learned that the official story didn't line up. Too many gaps, too many burned bridges. And now she was scrolling through photos from the rooftop bar. A friend owed her a favor. Paparazzi lenses worked wonders, even in shadows. There it was, Sienna's hand, Julian's watch, the touch. Kayla smiled and pressed save. Saturday morning. Julian woke up to a text from Kayla. Check your inbox, happy weekend. Inside the email was one photo and a message. If you're going to risk everything, at least make sure it's worth it. No threats, no accusations, just quiet, sharpened cruelty. Julian stared at it for a long time, then deleted it, but the damage had already been done. At that same moment, Sienna was at brunch in the West Loop, looking effortlessly unbothered in oversized sunglasses and an off-the-shoulder cream sweater. Across from her sat Denise, a friend from her L.A. days, now relocated to Chicago and quietly working in corporate PR. So, Denise said, sipping her mimosa, how long before you own the whole damn building? Sienna smirked. 2 months, maybe less. You think the wife suspects? She always suspects, Sienna said coolly. Women like Kayla don't miss things. They bide their time. And you're not worried? No. Why not? Sienna looked up from her eggs. Because I'm not the one with something to lose. Later that evening, Mason was working late again, on purpose. He waited until everyone had cleared out, then slipped into Sienna's office. He didn't touch anything, just looked, until he found what he was looking for, her client contact list, open on her screen. Luxtech, Valtor, Altima Global. He took a picture, just in case. Then he opened her drawer. Inside, a flash drive. He pocketed it and left. Monday, 6:58 a.m. Julian sat in his car outside the building, gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor him to the life he was still trying to hold together. He hadn't slept. Not really. The photo Kayla had sent lingered like perfume on old sheets. It wasn't just that she'd caught him. It was how she framed it. Cool, distant, calculated. She didn't send it to threaten him. She sent it to remind him who he married. He stepped out of the car and walked into the building like he owned it, because he still did. But for the first time in a long time, the power felt conditional, and he hated that. Upstairs, Sienna was already in the office. Coffee, folder, phone on silent. When he walked in, she didn't look up. "I'm impressed," he said, setting his briefcase down. "You beat me here." Sienna shrugged. "I don't sleep much." He studied her. There was something unreadable in her eyes, something colder than usual. "You okay?" She finally looked up. "Are you?" They stared at each other for one long beat too many. Then Julian said, "We need to be careful." Sienna rose from her chair, walked over slowly, heels echoing against the hardwood. She stopped inches from him. "I don't do careful," she said, and kissed him. Quick, sharp, dangerous. Then she walked away like it meant nothing. But they both knew better. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit office downtown, Kayla was meeting with her attorney and longtime fixer, Renee Dalton. Renee was known for two things, discretion and destruction, and she only came out when blood needed to be drawn, quietly. Kayla slid a folder across the table. Inside, the photo, the background check, a copy of the NDA Julian had Sienna sign on day one. "She's clever," Kayla said, "but not invincible." Renee flipped through the papers, expression flat. "What do you want done?" "I want options," Kayla said. "Just in case." Renee nodded. "You're playing chess." "I always have." "And Julian," Kayla smiled, slow and cool, "he thinks he's the king." Renee raised an eyebrow. "And what are you?" Kayla's smile deepened. "The board." Tuesday morning. Mason finally made his move. He waited for Sienna to leave her desk, then slipped the flash drive into his laptop. Password protected, of course. But not for long. He had a friend in IT who owed him a favor. A quick crack, and the contents spilled open. Emails, personal notes, audio files. One stood out. A voice memo, time-stamped just after midnight the week before. He clicked play. "Julian Carr is a weapon, but weapons only matter if you're the one holding them." Mason's heart thudded in his chest. He copied everything, then sent a single message. "We should talk." M to Sienna. She met him in the stairwell. No cameras, no witnesses. "You're braver than I thought," she said, arms crossed. Mason handed her a flash drive. "I made a copy. I don't want money." "Then what do you want?" He looked her dead in the eye. "I want in. Full access. High-level accounts. A title that matters." Sienna didn't blink. "You're blackmailing me?" He smiled. "I'm betting on you." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, cold, clean, almost admiring. "You're either very smart," she said, "or very stupid. I guess we'll find out." She took the drive and walked away. Wednesday, 2:17 p.m., Julian's office. Kayla appeared without knocking. You're busy, she said, not asking. Julian leaned back. What's up? She closed the door behind her and took the seat across from him. Her eyes were unreadable. I want you to fire her. He didn't pretend to misunderstand. On what grounds? Kayla smiled. On mine? Julian exhaled. There's no proof, and if I fire her now, it's obvious. You think it's not obvious already? He looked away. She leaned in. You think I care about your office fling, Julian? I don't. I care about control, about optics, about legacy. You're not just my husband, you're my brand. Julian looked at her then. Really looked. And for a moment he didn't see his wife. He saw a mirror. Cold, strategic, calculated. Maybe they'd always been more alike than he thought. Kayla stood, straightened her blazer. You have a week, she said. Then she was gone. Wednesday night. Sienna's phone buzzed. Private number, voice message received. She hit play. It was Julian, his voice low, tired. We need to talk. Things are moving faster than I can control. I don't want this to end the wrong way. She deleted it. Then she poured herself a drink. Because things weren't moving too fast. They were moving exactly the way she planned. Thursday, 11:36 a.m. Julian stood in front of the boardroom's tall windows, watching the skyline burn in morning sun. Behind him, 12 of Vireo and Locke's most powerful names sat around the long glass table, murmuring. He cleared his throat. I want to speak candidly. That silenced the room. He looked at Marcus, his brother, at Simone, their CFO, then down to where Sienna sat, calm as still water, lips painted a shade of war. I know there have been rumors, he said, about favoritism, about misconduct. Sienna didn't flinch. Kayla, seated 2 chairs down, leaned forward just slightly. And I want to be clear, Julian continued. This company has always valued merit, vision, strategy. Nothing else matters. A pause. Then, I am restructuring the executive pipeline. Promotions will be frozen until Q4. Every senior role will go through third-party compliance review. It was subtle, clean, political, but it was a shot at Sienna, a quiet invitation to step back. Instead, she leaned forward, calm and clear. I welcome the review. The silence was thunderous. Kayla watched her like a lion. Marcus hid his smirk. And Julian? He didn't look away from Sienna the whole time. That afternoon, Sienna stormed into Julian's office, slamming the door. A review? She hissed. That's your move? I warned you, Julian said flatly. You said you didn't do careful. Now you're learning why some of us do. She paced, furious. You're trying to force me out. I'm protecting both of us. No, she snapped. You're protecting yourself. Julian looked at her, at the heat in her eyes, the tremble in her fingers. And then he softened. I don't want to lose you. The words cut the air between them. Sienna stared, and then stepped in close. You already have, she whispered, and walked out. Meanwhile, Mason was busy. He'd used the flash drive well, mined every contact, every internal strategy doc, every vendor list. Then packaged it into a proposal and sent it to a recruiter with ties to a rival firm across the city. The offer came fast, mid-6 figures, creative director. But Mason wasn't quite ready to leave yet, not until he took a little more. Friday, 9:04 a.m. Kayla hosted a private breakfast at the W Hotel. Just 4 women, all executives, all powerful, and all very quietly on Kayla's side. Julian's not the problem, Kayla said over cappuccinos. The infection is internal. They didn't ask who she meant. She's beautiful, said one of the women. She's a parasite, Kayla replied. Smart, charismatic, ruthless. She reminds me of you, another said, raising a brow. Kayla sipped her coffee. She's not. Back at the office, a package appeared on Sienna's desk. No return address. Just a single note. You should know what they say about you when you're not in the room. Inside, a USB drive. She plugged it into her laptop in the privacy of a back conference room. A single audio file. The boardroom. Tuesday. Hidden microphone. Julian. Sienna's sharp, but dangerous. If we're not careful, she'll own more than just our attention. Simone. Then cut her loose. Kayla. Let her hang herself. She'll make the first move. They always do. Sienna sat back, fury ice cold in her chest. They weren't afraid of her power. They were betting she'd waste it. Friday night, Julian's penthouse. Dark, quiet. Rain against the windows. He was nursing a drink when the doorbell rang. He opened it to find Marcus. "You look like hell," his brother said, walking in uninvited. Julian dropped into the chair. "You here to gloat?" Marcus poured himself a drink. "Number, I'm here because you're spiraling." Julian didn't answer. "You picked a fight with a woman who can outthink you and a wife who owns you," Marcus continued. "That's not spiraling. That's suicide." Julian's jaw tightened. "I can still control this." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Can you?" A long silence. Then Julian said, "She wanted power. I gave her a ladder. She climbed too fast." "Then maybe," Marcus said, sipping, "you underestimated who taught her to climb." Saturday morning, Sienna met with her lawyer. Not Renee, not Kayla's. Heron, a young, brilliant woman named Zora Riley, who'd once worked in regulatory finance and now specialized in exit strategies. "I want insurance," Sienna said, sliding over a folder. Zora flipped through it. NDA violations, documentation of Julian's advances, back-channel emails from board members about her promotion. "You planning to sue?" Zora asked. Sienna smiled. "No." "Then what's the goal?" Sienna leaned forward. "I want them to know I could," Zora grinned. "You're playing chess." "No," Sienna said. "I'm flipping the board." Sunday, Kayla's home. Julian walked in unannounced. She didn't look up from her phone. "I think we should separate," he said. Still, she didn't move. "I'm tired of pretending," he added. Kayla finally looked up. "You think I care?" Julian flinched. "I've been planning this for weeks," she continued. "You think I didn't see this coming?" He blinked. Kayla stood, walked over. "You're not the first man to fall for a woman who made him feel alive again," she said softly. "But you are the first one dumb enough to forget who signs the checks." He opened his mouth, but she was already walking away. Sunday night. Sienna received a message from Renee Dalton, not Kayla. Renee had flipped. The message was short. "She's planning to burn you. You need to move first." Sienna smiled and deleted the message, because she already had. Monday, 8:15 a.m. The office had a strange quiet to it. People moved more slowly. Conversations were softer. The air was thick with tension, and no one could quite say why, but they felt it. Julian arrived just after 8. His suit was sharp, his posture perfect, but his eyes tired, worn down, not broken, not yet, but bending. He stepped into his office, shut the door, and exhaled hard. On his desk was a sleek black envelope. No name, no label, just a weight to it, like it knew it was important. He opened it. Inside, a single printed document. Letter of resignation, effective immediately. Below that, Sienna's name typed clean and cold. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to it was a USB. A note clipped to the drive read, "You had a choice. You chose wrong." Meanwhile, across town, Sienna was already gone. Not hiding, never that, but moved on. A new office, temporary, clean, one assistant, one laptop, and Zora. Her lawyer had set everything up in under 48 hours. New LLC PR strategy, pre-drafted press release. But that wasn't the big move. That was still coming. Zora looked up from her laptop. The files. Sienna handed over a hard drive. Everything, she said. Emails, audio, contracts, the works. Zora plugged it in and got to work. By noon, 5 major media outlets would have anonymous leaks about internal misconduct, board manipulation, and a toxic culture at Vireo and Locke. And by 5 p.m., one of them would publish. 11:30 a.m. Back at the office, Mason was in the copy room when his phone buzzed. "She's gone." From a burner number. He knew who it was and what it meant. He smiled to himself, pulled out a USB from his pocket, and walked straight into Julian's office. "I assume you heard?" Julian asked, not even looking up. "I did." Julian looked at him now. "Did you know this was coming?" Mason gave a tight smile. "I know everything that happens around here." Julian stood, slowly. "You think this is a win for you?" Mason placed the USB on the desk. "This isn't a win. Not yet." Julian stared. Mason leaned in. "But if you want to survive this, you're going to need me." 1:14 p.m. Kayla's penthouse. Her phone was blowing up. Renee texted. Twice. "She's making a move." Then again. "It's already done." Kayla turned on the news. One of the business networks was already running a headline. Vireo and Locke facing internal shakeup after shocking resignation. Below that, mentions of anonymous allegations, conflict of interest, and imminent federal audit. Kayla didn't flinch. She took a sip of wine and made a call. "Get me Simone and Marcus," she told her assistant. "Now." 2:45 p.m. Emergency board meeting. Julian sat at the head of the table, flanked by Marcus and Simone. The rest of the board buzzed with panic. "This is already public," someone snapped. "Our clients are calling." "Why didn't we know?" another asked. Julian stood. "Because she's smarter than we thought." Simone turned to him, sharp. "You brought her in. You vouched for her." Julian didn't blink. "I didn't realize she was playing a longer game." Kayla entered, fashionably late. Everyone looked to her. She sat and smiled. "She's not playing anymore," Kayla said. "She's winning." 3:16 p.m. Somewhere downtown, Sienna sat across from a woman named Alina Gates, publisher. Killer smile, even sharper instincts. "You've got one hell of a story," Alina said, flipping through the draft exposé. "Anonymous sources, audio proof, boardroom corruption." She glanced up. "And you want it timed?" Sienna nodded. "Wednesday, noon. Let them sweat first." Alina smirked. "You're not here to burn them," she said. "You're here to bury them." Sienna's lips curved. "Exactly." Monday night. Julian's penthouse. The place was dark again. He didn't turn on the lights. He just sat, drinking something too expensive to taste anymore. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice message. He hesitated, then hit play. "This isn't personal. It never was. You were just in my way. Now you're not." Julian stared out at the skyline. She hadn't said her name. She didn't have to. He already knew. Tuesday morning, Kayla was in damage control. Interviews lined up. Legal prepping statements. Simone and Marcus trying to hold the ship steady. But something was wrong. Another email, another leak, another scandal. The strikes were timed, surgical, brilliant, and every one of them pointed to a single fact. Sienna hadn't just left. She'd planned this. For months. Years, maybe. Kayla knew what she was watching, a hostile takeover in slow motion. And she wasn't mad. She was impressed. But also ready to hit back. Tuesday evening, Sienna looked out her temporary office window, watching the sun sink behind buildings she didn't plan to work under for long. Zora entered quietly. "We got a cease and desist from their legal team." Sienna smiled. "Perfect. That means they're scared." Zora crossed her arms. "You ready for what comes next?" Sienna turned. Her face was calm, poised, untouched by the storm she'd summoned. "I haven't even started yet." Wednesday, 11:56 a.m., 4 minutes before noon. Sienna stood in the lobby of an entirely different building, glossy, modern, and filled with the kind of new energy that didn't reek of old money and older secrets. Zora sat nearby, laptop open, a press release queued up and ready. A third tab showed Alina Gates' digital magazine site, still no update. The tension buzzed, but Sienna never flinched. She checked her watch. 11:59. Zora gave her a look. "You sure?" Sienna nodded once. Zora hit enter. 12 p.m. sharp. The article dropped. Front page, full screen. Glass ceilings and glass walls, inside the corporate chaos at Vireo and Locke. The byline, by Alina Gates, with internal documents provided by anonymous sources. But anyone paying attention knew exactly whose fingerprints were on it. By 12:07 p.m., it was trending on LinkedIn, X, and financial subreddits. By 12:12, CNBC was discussing it live. By 12:16, the phones at Vireo and Locke began ringing like fire alarms. Kayla was already in her war room, conference line open, legal team on standby. PR reps briefing her between calls. She read the headline once, twice, calmly, but her eyes, those burned. "This was her?" one of the execs asked. Kayla didn't answer. "She's got documentation, names, contracts." Still, Kayla said nothing. Finally, Marcus spoke up from the corner. "What do we do?" Kayla looked up at them all. "We hold the line." Her voice was flat steel. "She thinks she's won because she made noise." She stood, smoothed her dress. "But the spotlight burns both ways." Back at the office, Mason smiled. He read the article while sipping a green juice, feet on his desk. Lines from the article practically sparkled. "A culture that rewarded image over ethics. Questionable relationships between upper leadership and select protégés. Documents suggesting a rigged promotion pipeline." He laughed softly. The thing was, it was all true. And yet, he felt no guilt. He wasn't built for guilt. He forwarded the link to his new recruiter with one sentence. "I told you they'd implode." Then he opened a folder on his drive labeled Exit Package. He wasn't just jumping ship. He was about to sell the lifeboat. Julian read the article alone. He didn't finish it, couldn't. He got halfway through, past the part where anonymous insiders described a controlling, manipulative environment fostered by executive leadership, and stopped. The words echoed too close to home. The worst part. It was all laid out calmly, professionally. No drama, just facts. That made it real. That made it fatal. 1:42 p.m. Internal fallout. HR sent out a company-wide email. "We are reviewing the allegations and cooperating fully with investigators." That's when panic began to set in. People started packing files, scrubbing drives, whispering. Simone slammed her door shut. Marcus canceled a meeting mid-sentence. Julian disappeared. And Kayla, she left the office, not in retreat, in preparation. 3 p.m. The counter-strike. Sienna was still in her temporary space when her phone buzzed. Zora answered first, then looked up, eyebrows raised. "They're not suing." Sienna frowned. "No cease and desist." Zora shook her head. "Worse." She turned her laptop around. Breaking news. Former Vireo executive under investigation for data theft. Below that, a blurry paparazzi-style photo of Sienna leaving the Vireo building 2 weeks ago with a manila envelope in her hand. They were framing her. Sienna's mouth tightened, but she didn't speak. Zora stared. "They're trying to flip the story," Sienna whispered. "Let them." Then picked up her phone and made a call. "Hi, Alina. Let's run the second piece." 4:22 p.m. The second strike. Alina Gates dropped part 2. Title: The Real Power Behind Vireo, Kayla Locke and the Silent Coup. This one was more dangerous. It wasn't just about Sienna's story, it was about the entire structure of the firm. How Kayla operated behind the curtain, installing loyalists, silencing whistleblowers, rewriting policy to sideline potential threats, emails, memos, quotes from former employees, and just enough evidence to make people believe everything. By 5 p.m., 2 of Vireo's biggest clients had issued statements, pausing all collaboration and pending internal reviews. By 5:13, Kayla stood alone in her private suite, her phone ringing off the hook. She didn't answer any of them, but she wasn't broken. No, she was cold now, and she was ready. Wednesday night, Julian walked into the building through the side entrance. Security didn't even look him in the eye. He rode the elevator up in silence. When the doors opened, Kayla was already waiting. She didn't offer a greeting. He didn't apologize. They just looked at each other, 2 soldiers who'd survived the same bomb. "She's going to." "Keep going," Julian said. Kayla nodded. "I want her gone," he added. Kayla stepped closer. "Then you'll need to lose something first." Julian stared at her. "What do you mean?" She smiled faintly. "Your name." Thursday morning, Sienna met with a venture capital firm. They wanted to back her. Hard. "Whatever you're building, we're in," one of them said. "You've got the story, the momentum, and the respect." Sienna leaned back, smiled. "I'm not building a new agency," she said. They blinked. "Then what?" Sienna slid a folder across the table. Inside, a list of names. Former Vireo clients. High dollar. Unhappy. "I'm taking theirs." Thursday, 3:15 p.m. Kayla's suite. Rain slapped the glass like it was angry at the world. Kayla stood in front of the window, one hand on her hip, the other holding a tumbler of dark liquor she hadn't touched. Behind her, the boardroom sat empty. She had called for a meeting. No one showed. Julian had gone radio silent. Simone was on leave. Mason, gone. Desk cleared. Files wiped. And now the storm was closing in. Zora had just released part 3 of the exposé. This one had teeth. It detailed shell corporations tied to Kayla, offshore accounts, NDA misuse, nothing technically illegal, but enough to torch her reputation in the industry. Kayla finally took a sip. Cold, bitter. She smiled. So that's how Sienna wanted to play it. Fine. Game on. Thursday, 6:42 p.m. Sienna's temporary HQ. The place felt different now. Not like a borrowed office, like a war room. She sat at the long table, laptop open, phone buzzing every few minutes. Zora typed furiously nearby, managing a growing team of contractors and freelancers that had appeared seemingly overnight. Her new agency wasn't just forming, it was moving, and they weren't starting from scratch. 7 clients had signed LOIs that week, 3 from Vireo, 2 major ones. One of them had called her directly, thanking her for blowing up the system. This was more than revenge. It was replacement. Sienna wasn't just winning. She was becoming what they said she couldn't be. Friday morning, Mason's apartment. Clean. Too clean. He'd always hated clutter, but this was clinical. He had already lined up 3 interviews. He wasn't worried about his future, but he kept watching the story, refreshing the headlines, reading the articles, and reading between the lines. His name hadn't shown up once. That meant Sienna knew he was useful, which meant he still had time. Friday, 2 p.m., Vireo's legal offices. Julian sat across from 2 lawyers and a forensic tech. They handed him a folder. Inside was a final report. The conclusion: the documents Sienna released were real. The emails were real. And the claims? Substantiated. He closed the folder without flinching. But inside, he was unraveling. Years of empire building undone in a week. All because he let a brilliant woman into a space he thought he owned. He stood. Send a settlement offer. The lawyers blinked. How much? He didn't hesitate. Whatever she wants. Friday, 4:30 p.m. Kayla's move. She wasn't going out quiet. She had her own story, her own files. She scheduled a private sit-down with a rival media outlet. Told them everything. How Sienna had started planning her exodus over a year ago. How she'd manipulated Mason, played Julian, seduced clients, twisted truth into performance. She's not exposing the system, Kayla told the camera. She's just replacing it with herself. The interview would air Monday morning, but she didn't wait. She leaked the raw footage that same night. Saturday, 10:12 a.m. The rebuttal. Sienna woke up to Kayla's version of events plastered across half the internet. Half smears, half truths, all venom. She didn't panic. She didn't call Zora. She just opened her phone, went to Instagram, and posted a single video. No makeup, no lighting, just her. Raw. She looked directly into the lens and said, "There's a reason they're angry. Because I didn't break under them. I learned from them. And now they're scared. They want you to believe I'm the villain. But the only thing I'm guilty of is surviving." Millions watched it in real time. Tens of thousands shared it. And the comments? CEO energy. Let her lead. I believe her. By that afternoon, she was the headline, not Kayla. Sunday, the close. Sienna signed her first major contract under her new firm, a global lifestyle brand worth 8 figures. By evening, she had a full staff, 12 hand-picked hires from across the country, and every single one had once been overlooked, underestimated, or underpaid. This wasn't a company. It was a movement. She called it Noir Strategies. And its motto? We build what they fear. Monday morning, Vireo. The office was half empty. Julian resigned that afternoon. Kayla didn't show up. Simone went quiet. And the board. They met privately to restructure. But everyone knew. The reign was over. A new era had begun.